Hello, hello everyone. How's it going? Seeing people come into the webinar. If you wouldn't mind, jump in the chat. Tell me who you are, your name, your role, your company, and your favorite sequence or sales play would be very helpful. I usually have Taylor Swift playing at the beginning of these, so I didn't look her up in time. So why don't I do that so we can what Taylor Swift song should we listen to? How about Blank Space? That's a good one. So why don't we listen to that in the beginning? Oh, we got an ad. We got an ad. Let's see. What's ad? What are they trying to get me to buy? Black Friday special, a month. I hope everyone's doing well. Oh, am I frozen? My frozen, oh, okay, it's working now. Okay, awesome, it's working now. Well, y'all missed my diatribe. So if you jump into the chat, give me your name, company, and your favorite sales play to run. That would be helpful. And your role, that would be helpful too. We'll put blank space in the background so we can ease the awkwardness at the beginning of a webinar. Usually when I don't have a host, it can be kind of weird in the beginning. So let's go ahead and jump in here. Connor loves Taylor Swift. That's great to hear. She's pretty good. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump into the content here. I know that we're 2 minutes in and we got quite a bit to cover. Here we go. Brian, copywriter. Oh, that's a great line, Brian. I'm here to learn how to make my SDRs happy and successful. That is great. Michael from Trey, you're an AE. LinkedIn connections, that's a good play. Michael, tell Ralph that I said hi. I got to have a after party that he was at, and we had a whole FliptheScript cake at the end of the tour. And true story, we had a party here. It was in my place, and my neighbors put together the entire party, and they went like absolutely to the wall. They made it all Halloween themed. I just walked in my place and it looked like there was smoke everywhere. There was a fortune teller that was in this room, so you could get your fortune read. And then after 15 minutes of the party, my landlord called me and was like, it's too loud, and he shut us down. 15 minutes of the party, and it was like an epic party. Drinks, all kinds of cupcakes with your name on it. And after 15 minutes, I had to completely pull the entire party and pivot it down to this bar nearby. So anywho, so tell Ralph I'm sorry about that because he was at it. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into the content here so that we stay on time. So welcome to the Comprehensive Encyclopedia of Sales Plays. I'm very excited to dive in. This is going to be a pretty nerdy webinar in terms of all the plays that you can run. But the asset that I am going to be presenting from, I will send it in follow-up, but anyone who attended the tour, this is tour asset number 1. So you should have received at the tour a full laminated copy of this so that you can see all of the different plays. Full disclosure, I did a webinar on this a few months ago, and I probably about doubled the size of the playbook. So I want to go ahead and jump in here so that we can make sure that we get through everything. So this is the asset. Ping me in the chat if you can see my screen. You'll have to pardon the beanie. I thought that I would keep it tour themed, and I wore this beanie a lot on the tour. So this is the entire encyclopedia, and this is tour asset number 1 that you should have received if you were attending the tour. Okay, awesome. You can see my screen. So this is all of the plays that you can run from a pipeline perspective, meaning if you're trying to book more meetings, these are all the different plays that you can run. And for definition's sake, let's call this trigger-based relevance. So what I mean by that is there is some kind of movement on behalf of either the prospect on behalf of the company, but something happened to where there is a relevant play and it's trigger based. So this is apart from core relevance, which I'll go into in webinar 3. So core relevance is like their buyer persona, their metrics, their market segment, their industry, et cetera. But this is trigger-based relevance, meaning there's some kind of movement on behalf of the company that happened that you want to mention in your outreach. So for definition's sake, we set the deck here for today. The definition of relevance is going to be one to many, meaning many even being two. If I can send this message to one person and I can send the exact same message to a second person and it still holds true in terms of the relevance, then that's going to be relevance, not personalization. So personalization, yes, you'll get the recording afterwards. So I hope you weren't asking because you're going to log off now. Whoever that was, it was an anonymous attendee in the Q&A. So if you have any questions, by the way, just pile them either in the Q&A in the chat, and I'll try to get to as many as possible. But there are 3 things at play here. There within any kind of messaging. There's trigger-based relevance, which is what we're going to go into in the encyclopedia. So it's any kind of movement that's happened on behalf of the prospect or the company. There's core relevance, which is a static relevance, meaning buyer persona, industry segment, vertical, what will resonate with them and the problems that you're trying to solve. And then personalization. And personalization is defined as one-to-one messaging only. So that's, I can send this message to the anonymous attendee, for instance, and I can only send it to that person. So a great example would be they wrote an article. So in webinar 3, we're going to go through how to hook all 3 of those together. How to incorporate trigger-based relevance, how to incorporate, meaning there was some kind of movement, how to incorporate static core relevance, meaning their buyer persona, and how to incorporate personalization into a playbook. We're going to do that for a playbook if you do believe in personalization and you want to use that as a strategy. Anyone who's seen any content of mine before knows that I love personalization, if nothing else for the pattern interrupt, because most people aren't doing it. And then also a playbook if you don't want to incorporate any personalization. So from a high level, you feel like you're not seeing the right screen. I think you're seeing the right screen. I hope you are. It should be in the encyclopedia. I'm scrolling up and down. So let me know if you are seeing the right screen. But from an industry perspective, okay, awesome. You're seeing the encyclopedia. From an industry perspective, most people are going to define, it's muddied waters on which one is what, of like what personalization is. And most people would say that trigger-based relevance is personalization. But again, personalization is going to be one-to-one messaging. I can only send this to one person. So for instance, Ryan in the chat, I can only send this message to Ryan is going to be personalization. So without further ado, let's jump in here into all of the different trigger-based relevance plays that you can run. And the great news about a trigger-based relevance, and this might blow a couple people's minds, or I hope it does, any kind of relevance play, meaning if you can send it out to multiple people, you can mass blast it, right? So you're going to lose efficacy in terms of personalization if it's mass blastable. So any of these plays, you can essentially write a sequence. If you have a sales engagement provider like Outreach, you can write a sequence of messages where you can just send them out in an automated fashion with a dynamic tag of hi first name. Now, I always advocate for incorporating some level of personalization in there, and we're going to get into how to do that. But these messages from front to end, you can start a play, you can write out, craft several different messages according to whatever the trigger-based relevance is. So let's pick, that the company IPO'd, for instance, and you can load them into a sequence, and then you can just send out those messages. You don't have to put any input. So that's the strength of a system, and a strength of trigger-based relevance is you can write all of that out beforehand so that people don't have to spend the time to craft that in every single time. So let's go into the actual plays. So there are 4 different categories to this encyclopedia, and I'm going to start far left here. And far left is going to be at the top of this asset. You're going to see there's a scale of whether this is inbound or whether this is outbound. So, and there are shades of gray in the middle. So inbound typically in the industry is, I'm just going to blow up a lot of myths. Inbound is typically seen as anyone who took a marketing action. But as I talk to account executives, talk to SDRs, talk to any prospecting teams, they'll tell me that a content download and a demo request are very, very different. And they'll tell me, and in my experience they are as well, and they'll tell me that inbound is higher quality. And what they mean by that is there is not necessarily that the company's better, or not necessarily the role's better of the person who requested the demo, meaning they're higher up in the org. It just means that there's higher buyer intent. So buyer intent, as defined, is going to be they're raising their hand and they're saying, I want to talk to you about your company. I want to talk, I want to go through a demo. I want to see your platform. I want to, take any kind of, go through a journey with you to understand what your platform does. So for inbound, and right underneath here, underneath the first line, you're going to see the title of the category and then what the definition is. So inbound, I would define as a hand raiser. This is someone who's saying they want to see your product. And the great news about that is the prospect will always know your company in this case scenario. So we all want more of these, marketing's a way to fuel them, but inbound requests are going to be people who want to take a look at your product. So you're going to see the highest conversion into a booked meeting here because they're asking for it. And you're also going to see a higher ratio of closed won. And the reason for that is another myth in the industry is that the average close rate is 20%. And what people mean by that is in aggregate, all of my leads, whether they're outbound or inbound, it's 20%. But what's actually happening, or for most of the teams that I've seen or worked with, the inbound conversion is going to be anywhere from 30 to 40%. And the reason for that is, number one, they're asking to see your product. But number two, from a philosophical level, you're not going to lose to the status quo very often here, because the status quo, you lose to the status quo when they decide to make no decision at all. So within inbound, they're typically wondering, they know that they have a problem. They self-identified a problem. Now, it might be a problem you solve for and it might not be. So I'd be very inquisitive as to the reasons of why, what they're looking to achieve and what's the problem that they're running into. But I digress. They know that they have a problem. And so they're just wondering if they can solve it with you and whether it's you or your competitors. So you're going to see a conversion rate of about 30 to 40% because you're not going to lose to indecision very often here. Because if people have raised their hand, and I would think through, whenever you're walking through a very crowded town square, for instance, and maybe if you jump in the chat and tell me your experience, when you're walking through a crowded town square of like San Francisco, for instance, which is where I'm based, and you see a street performer who's, doing some kind of music or some kind of act, and you want to watch, usually what is your behavior? Do you watch dead on? Do you stop and do you look at them? Or do you do something else? If you could pile in the chat and tell me what you do in that case scenario. And then I'll make my point hopefully afterwards. But inbound is going to be someone who's saying, I want to talk to you about your product. And usually that's going to be a leap. People raising their hand, hover awkwardly and edge on the crowd. So Brian, I'm going to pick on you. Why do you hover awkwardly and on the edge of the crowd? Why don't you just go up to the front and watch them dead on? What's the risk there? Seeing what others are going to do. So what's the risk there? If you stop and you actually look at the street performer, what are you afraid is going to happen to you in that case scenario? Wouldn't stand there alone. Let's wait for Brian to answer here. But from an inbound perspective, it takes us a lot to, bingo, Ryan already nailed it. So we're afraid that the street performer is going to look at us. They're going to include us in the program, or worst case scenario, or a equally as bad case scenario is basically that they're going to want money. So same experience with sales. We don't like to request a demo and to talk to people about a product, not because we don't necessarily want more information, not because we don't want to buy it, but because we don't want to get wrapped up into a sales cycle. So I went really deep into this concept on the tour, but we don't like being sold to, but we love to buy. And the reason is salespeople's goals, and I went very deep into this on the tour, salespeople's goals is on selling the most amount of product at the highest ticket item. And a buyer's goal is to buy the fewest amount of things that will solve their problem at the lowest ticket item. So a buyer and a seller, make no mistake, are at war. They're at war when they're on the sales floor. So they know you have an agenda, and that's to sell them the most amount of stuff for the highest ticket item. So there's an inherent set of mistrust. So people want to know more about your product, but they don't want to go into a sales cycle. So Forrester did a report on all the things that you consider beforehand, before you buy something. And there are 20 different things that you consider, 20 different variables or sources that you go to for information. The top 3 are peer-to-peer, meaning I turn to someone that I know and I say, hey, are you using outreach, for instance? How do you like it? The second is industry influencers. Who is Gary Vaynerchuk using? And then the third is third-party reviews. If you go 17 variables deep, the last thing that someone uses as a source of information on your product is a demo with a salesperson or is talking to a salesperson. So we don't like to be sold to. So these inbound requests, it takes quite a bit for someone to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm going to make my way. Like, I'd like to take a look at the product, because they know they're entering into a sales cycle and they know you're going to send them 25 messages and they're going to feel guilty if they don't buy. So we don't love being sold to. So point being, for these inbound requests, the amount of problem that they've self-identified is usually pretty high, because they don't want to talk to you about your product typically. So to do that, they essentially have to identify that they have a problem that's so deep that they're willing to talk to a salesperson to solve it. So inbound, there's only 2 plays: demo request and prospects who came in through the chat box. So this is like, the chat box is all whiskeys, all bourbons are whiskeys, but all whiskeys aren't bourbons. Meaning, if they come in through the chat box, they're not necessarily raising their hand. But if they're in the chat box raising their hand, they want to talk to you about your product. So there are 2 different plays of hand raisers. These are obviously the highest conversion in terms of booked meetings and closed won. And the only 2 plays here are demo requests and prospects who came in through the chat box. And from a messaging perspective, we're going to get into this very deeply in the 3rd webinar, but I would suggest using one-to-many messaging only, meaning using a template. So you're optimizing in this case scenario for speed. So a lot of times people are in child ego state whenever they request a demo, meaning easy come, easy go. I want chicken nuggets. No, I want macaroni and cheese. No, I want pizza. No, I'm just going to go to sleep. I'm too tired. Their decision making tree is going to be very, very quick, because it's based on desire. So the threshold for you, or the thing that you're trying to combat, is the complexity of which it takes them to set a demo, and the speed of which it takes them to set a demo. So for all the teams out there who are running a BANT process, or who are following up the next day with emails and calls and et cetera, and are not enabling them to schedule on the site, for instance, and there's a quick way to do that. I'll go into that, later of how you can do that in another webinar. But you're optimizing here for speed. And the only thing that I would really be asking them is, like, how do I get them on the calendar? How do I, just make sure that I can talk to them about the product, because that's what they want. So inbound's pretty simple, 2 plays. It's a hand raiser. I'd use one-to-many messaging only, so you don't have to take the time to personalize. They're coming to you. For a lack of better appropriate terms, this is what I say is, this is someone coming up to you at a bar and saying, hey, can I buy you a drink? Like, do you want to go out with me? So the only thing you should be thinking about is qualifying questions. They came up to you, so the buyer intent is high. So I would use relevance messaging only, because again, you're optimizing for speed. So that's the trigger, is that they requested a demo. The second category here is going to be postbound, and postbound is going to be non-hand raising marketing leads. So non-hand raising marketing leads are going to be the typical content downloads, webinar registrants, webinar attendees, but these are all of the plays where someone's trying to take a marketing action, but they aren't raising their hand to buy. So this can be a very rich category. The reality is most people don't optimize for this. So they send out an email and they say, thanks for attending the webinar. Do you want to buy? And most people, their qualification is higher, meaning you'll get better companies in here, you'll get more people, you know, with better titles, but they're not raising their hand to buy. So I'm viewing postbound, bridgebound, and outbound, all three as categories of which I have to apply some level of outbound effort, time, attention, and care to this lead to get them to convert. So it doesn't mean that they're lower quality, but it just means that they haven't raised their hand. And so this pool of leads are wildly underused by companies because they'll send them one demo, you know, do you want a demo message? And if the person doesn't respond, then they just move on. But this is going to be warmer than a cold outbound. You know, so from a scale perspective, my biggest tip here would be to automate the list cleaning. So I would, from a list cleaning perspective within your CRM, try to scour out all of the people that do not hit a demographic criteria, meaning they aren't the right title, and that they don't hit a firmographic criteria, meaning they aren't the right size company, they aren't the right industry of company, et cetera. And from an automation perspective, this is actually pretty simple to do and lethalize my teams, is list cleaning all the people who didn't have the right title or didn't have the right company, meaning I don't want to sell into them. And then sending the lead to the account owner to this sequence in an automated real-time fashion. So if someone downloaded a piece of content from my last company, for instance, it was automatically fluxed into the content download sequence for the rep that owned the account. I also had a postbound unowned team. And this means that they hit the title criteria, they're the right title, they're the right size company, but they weren't owned, meaning for some reason, you know, they weren't within the owned accounts for my SDR team or my account executive team. That team in specific, I asked for a couple of people who wanted to be a part of kind of an experiment. Only 2 of my reps raised their hands. I said, go ahead, you know, like let's pull you on board. They 4x'd their quota. And their quota was not light. My enterprise SDRs had a 15 meeting quota with no inbound included, meaning no demo requests or hand raisers. Even if they own the account, you know, they still didn't get the demo request. And they 4x their quota because of their follow-up here. So the plays in this category are pretty simple. Again, a non-hand raising marketing lead. So the trigger is they took some type of action in regards to your marketing team. So content downloads is a great example. Webinar registrant, meaning it's your company's webinar. So like this one, for instance, if you registered for a webinar for FliptheScript, you could automatically in real time be flexed into this sequence. A webinar attendee, a webinar registrant for a sponsored webinar. So this is my company sponsored another company's webinar, and we want all the registrants from that list. A webinar attendee for a sponsored webinar, meaning it's not our webinar, it's another company's webinar, but we sponsored it. An event registrant. So this is someone attending an event. So imagine, you know, if you registered for the tour, you would be flexed into a real-time sequence that says that you registered for the tour. An event attendee, meaning you actually attended the event, you had attended the tour. So these are going to be different lists in both case scenarios. And I always suggest breaking these lists up into these use cases. And the reason being, it should change the messaging that you're sending to the person. So I've gotten a lot of different follow-ups from people saying, hey, thanks for attending, you know, let's pick Outreach's conference, Unleash, for instance. Hey, thanks for attending Unleash and for dropping by our booth. And I'm like, number one, I registered for Unleash, but I didn't attend it. And number two, I didn't drop by your booth. So the strength of this system is that you can cater messaging at a scale level, and write out that messaging in specific and then load the list accordingly. So I would not suggest lumping registrants and attendees together. Usually you're going to have a 30% show rate for a free event, for instance. And so you want to bifurcate these out, and it's very, very simple to do. All you have to do is create another sequence and change a couple of words of thanks for attending the event versus thanks for registering for the event, so that you know the difference between the two. So these two are for event registrants for a company event, event attendees for a company event, and then the last two are if I sponsored an event. So for instance, I outreach sponsored the Flip the Script tour. So this would be a sequence for the people who registered for the Flip the Script tour that outreach wanted to reach out to. And this would be someone who attended the tour that outreach wanted to reach out to. So it wasn't their event, but they were sponsoring my event. Thank you, by the way, Outreach, for being a sponsor. The next two plays here are member of a company community, meaning your company has some kind of community, either buyer community, prospect community, sales expertise community, that you can create a play around this. And the trigger is that they join the community. The second one here is a member of a sponsored community. So again, the community of Flip the Script, Outreach is a sponsor. So if you join the community, then you can create a sequence around that. Freemium, free trial. So these are different. Freemium is I get a piece, I get Slack, for instance, for free for forever. But their hope is that I have a paid upgrade. A free trial is they get a limited time version of the full platform. And again, the reason I'm stressing the differences is because the differences matter to your prospect. So time and time and time again, I get people pinging me messages of bad outreach. And what they mean by that is it's saying something that's not true about them. Thanks for attending the event. And they're like, I didn't attend the event. So the strength of this is splitting all of these use cases up. And the difficulty of this is it's pretty trite, very trivial, at the beginning, creating a different sequence and typing in the language accordingly. So I would suggest you split them up. So freemium, free trial, followers on social media. This is going to be the least scalable sequence, because you obviously have to pull the list from social media of who's following your company on social media. Interacting with your company on social media. It's bizarre, and it sounds like I'm being crazy of like, well, all the followers on social media probably are the people that interact with your company, meaning they like and share stuff. But these two lists for Flip the Script, for instance, are wildly different. Some of the people that interact with most of my content aren't following Flip the Script on LinkedIn. By the way, if you're one of those, go follow us. Just kidding. But point being, these lists are very different of people who interact with you and people who've taken the step to follow you on social media. Blog subscriber, newsletter, buyer intent leads. So buyer intent leads are if you're working with a platform like G2 or Trust Radius, for instance. So G2 and Trust Radius are third-party review platforms. And when you're checking out a software like Outreach, for instance, or Seismic, let's pick Seismic, you're looking at Seismic because you're thinking about buying, because you want to do your research beforehand before you request to talk to a salesperson, then they can gate that at that point. I don't mean to tell everyone Santa's not real in November, but Santa's not real. And yes, they can track that. So they're gating through from an account level. Let's say that I'm at Oracle and I'm checking out Seismic. Then Seismic, if they're working with G2 or Trust Radius, gets a ping that says someone from Oracle within the state of Florida or within San Francisco is checking you out. So this is a very lucrative play, specifically for mid-funnel, but from a pipeline perspective, again, people want to check you out and how you're ranking against competitors beforehand. So there is an integration now where if I'm at Oracle, again, they can only do the company level. They can't do the contact level. And so there's a way within the CRM that I had set up in my last org, for instance, if I'm at Oracle and I check out Seismic, if I'm Seismic, I would pull every one of my contact base from Oracle that hit the right title and flex them into this sequence for my reps. So you don't know who it is that was checking out Seismic, but someone at the account is. So this can dictate a lot of language, and that this is some kind of trigger that they're researching you. Dark funnel leads, this is going to be providers like Sixth Sense or Bombora. And what they're doing, and the difference between them and G2 and Trust Radius is G2 and Trust Radius, you have to go to the G2 or Trust Radius site. Dark funnel leads are, you are tracking what people are searching on the web. So again, Santa's really not real. You know, that there are a certain amount of criteria that they are a cookieless tracker that's understanding, are you doing research on the category or are you doing research on the web, you know, according to their category, and how can I flex these into a play? So people might say this is creepy. I'd say that this is nothing that a good pattern interrupt can't diffuse. So I say not to be creepy, but looks like someone from your company, you know, is researching us on the web. But the point being, we have become an internal buying community, meaning we don't want to talk to a salesperson. So we do as much research as we can beforehand. So we've made it very difficult on advertisers to advertise to us. So, you know, all's fair in love and war, right? That's tech. So these are the two kind of tracking leads. They viewed your website. And then the last one here, they also can track you if you view their website. Thanks to HubSpot. Love you, HubSpot. And the last one here is going to be high value MQL. So typically companies are going to say something's an MQL, a marketing qualified lead, whenever they took a multitude of these actions, and they're going to do lead scoring. Lead scoring, to be opinionated here, I must learn to form an opinion. Lead scoring, as it's done to date, is one of the most damaging things to an org, especially because it doesn't include title. Usually level of title, but another conversation for another time. But if a VP of sales over at Oracle sneezes in my direction, I want to talk to him. An intern over at Oracle downloads 50 pieces of content, I don't care, you know, because of the level of the role. So another conversation for another time. So I would essentially very, very much encourage to do away with lead scoring as much as you can. Different, again, session for a different time. But the only time someone should become an MQL, so to speak, but they didn't take one of these actions, meaning you should have a play, in my opinion, built on each one of these actions. Again, VP of sales attends a company event, I want to talk to them. Doesn't matter if they do anything else. But the only case of which they should become an MQL, if they didn't take one of these actions, is if they opened a lot of marketing emails. You know, so I would create a play for that, of if they're engaging with a lot of your marketing emails. And again, I'm setting the bar for all of these plays of, do they hit the right title, level of title, and discipline of title? And do they hit the right company size, whether owned or not? And if they take any of these actions, I'm gating them through in real time. So lead scoring is one of the reasons for the death of the sales industry, in my opinion. It's one of the main culprits and main myths. But if they take any one of these actions, you know, then I essentially want to gate them through. You know, so people will, let's say I'm prospecting into Oracle, they'll say, well, I'm going to go cold outbound. And I'm like, the chances of them actually doing one of these other plays is actually extremely high. But you just followed up with a whole bunch of postbound leads, you know, with lackluster messaging. And so you ignored the person when they attended an event, but you went after them in cold outbound. Roll that math around in your head. Like, the person downloaded some content, you shot on some generic messaging, you know, which will never work. You know, imagine if I followed up with you all and said, hey, thanks for attending my webinar. Want to buy? You know, your response would probably be no. If I wanted to buy, I would have requested to talk to you, but you wanted to attend the webinar just for information. So I would use this as a lethal trigger. So we're ignoring in most cases that they took one action, but then we're seeking after them from a cold outbound perspective. So absolutely bizarre, because this would mean that they're a little bit warmer to me. So I'm going to get off the soapbox for a second, but the infrastructure between SDR or full cycle account executive, if they're doing the prospecting and marketing, is absolutely bizarre. It's jarring how people are incorporating these leads. So let's move on here. So again, postbound for a summary is going to be non-hand raising marketing leads. I would scour through and find out who's qualified from an automation perspective and flex them into a sequence that you can write off the messaging beforehand. Now, I'm going to go into this in a third webinar, but for a hand raiser, one-to-many messaging will work because you're optimizing for speed. For a postbound initiative, they haven't raised their hand yet. So I would incorporate one-to-many messaging of you downloaded content, you attended this webinar, and then I would transition with, but more importantly, and then I would personalize to them. But more importantly, I saw that you wrote this article. I saw that you did this thing. You know, I saw that you engaged with this post. I saw in your About Me section that X, Y, and Z. So I'd say the words why I leverage, but more importantly, is because it is more important. Them, they're more important than my marketing team. Right? So I'm like, yeah, you downloaded this content, you attended this webinar, you attended the tour, but more importantly, you did this thing, and that's really valuable. So in the bar here, you'll see that I incorporate one-to-many messaging plus one-to-one messaging. So I'm going to go into that in the third webinar of how to do that more deeply, but just from a high level so that you have it. Postbound leads, all of these, I would follow up at a real-time perspective with the ones who hit my criteria, and you can automate the crud out of that, meaning automate that they're put into the sequence, and then I incorporate some level of personalization on the front message. Can I just say that I'm really encouraged that we have started with the same amount of attendees to this webinar, and we haven't churned anyone. So I watch these statistics, and you always wonder if you're going on a rant too much and that people will churn. So I just want to give everyone like this is very encouraging to me because I'm going pretty deep here. So thank you very much for sticking with me on the line and not churning. Every single time I see someone churn, it hurts a little bit. I want to start tearing up. So thank you for staying on the line. So bridge bound, let's get into this category. You guys are amazing. Thank you for the engagement. Thanks for staying live. Thanks for, yeah, last one to leave wins a prize. So thank you for being a part of the community in general. I can't tell you how many rants I go on to my family, friends with few ones that I have about the people that take the time to attend these webinars. So attend these webinars, dive into the content. It's truly a dream come true for me. So thank you very much. So let's get into bridge bound now that I'm about to cry. Let's get into bridge bound, and bridge bound is going to be the third category, and it's the medius category. And this is a way, this is trigger-based relevance, meaning they took some kind of action, but it's not in relationship to your marketing team. So there was some kind of action on the prospect level or some kind of action on the company level, but it had no relationship to your marketing team. So postbound is marketing team. Bridge bound is they took some kind of action, not in relationship to your marketing team. So the significance of this is most people again say like, this is personalization. And I'm like, no, it's not, because you can automate it. If hypothetically you didn't want to do personalized messaging to them, you just automate a play, you know, and write out the messaging that says, for instance, I notice you share a common VC with us. So this is one-to-many messaging only. So there are 4 different categories to bridge bound, and there are 2 on the left here that raises the likelihood that they'll take a meeting, but not necessarily that they'll buy. And then there are 2 categories that raise the likelihood that they'll ultimately buy. So let's dig in here. And again, you're bridging into the prospect via a one-to-many play, but it doesn't have a relationship to your marketing team. And the relationship here is within inbound and postbound, the prospect knows your company. Inbound, much more likelihood than postbound. In bridge bound, you don't know if they know your company or not. The action that they took had no relationship to you. So the trigger, you know, becomes relevant to you. So I would argue, and Keenan very heatedly did on the bus, and I was like, keep going. A lot of people will use these triggers whether they relate to their company or not. A great example is company funding. It's like, hey, you got money. Notice you got money. Want to buy my stuff? Because I sell stuff for money. Is usually the play. The point being, I want to outline all of the exhaustive plays that you can do here, but I would think through which one of these are relevant to you. And by relevance, I mean, which one of these plays would mean that your prospect has an additional problem that they didn't have before that you can now solve for. So the first category here is going to be bridge bound based on relationship. And what I mean by that is there's some kind of pre-existing relationship with that prospect or that company and you or someone from your company. So let's dig in here. This is the longest category. I think I have 21 plays in total, but the first one is a common VC. So you share a common VC with the company at hand. The second one, and again, this is going to raise the likelihood that they will take a meeting, but not necessarily that they'll buy. So this is the good old relationship sell, whether I like it or not. And there is something to whether we agree with it or not, whether we like it or not, whether we're trying to change it or not, there is something to the oil money golf club, meaning there's a relationship there and that's how some people buy or why they take the initial meeting. Now, if they're a good leader, and I'm just going to be as opinionated as I can because there's no one on the line to stop me. If they're a good leader, they'll take the meeting because of the relationship, but they will question to their core, is this a good decision for my team? Meaning, am I running into the problem? So effective leaders in 2021 are not going out to dinner with someone and then being like, they were nice and I should, from a political perspective, buy their product. A high integrity leader will take the meeting to protect the relationship. And because that person says like, oh, it's a good idea that you meet with this person, but they will be very, very calculative and very, very, monomaniacal about thinking about, is this a problem I run into? And is this the best decision for my team? There's a gray area. Some people just buy because of the relationship. I hope that those are getting fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer. But at the core, you want to focus on from the discovery and demo perspective on what are the problems this person is having, but this should earn you a little bit more credibility to get the actual meeting. So common VC with your company, companies that share a common VC with your customers. I thought that play would never in a million years work. It actually worked, was one of my top performers at my last org. So this would be your customer share a common VC with that company. And by VC, I mean venture capitalists, meaning they backed you with some money. So typically portfolio companies will want you to buy from one another because they invested in all of you and they want their money to influx to one another. Very nepotistic, but true story. So common VC with your customers, referral to the network of your happy customers. So I would go through, look at my happy customers and look through their network and say like, on LinkedIn, are they connected with any of the accounts or any of the people that I want to prospect into because they're a happy customer. And I stress happy, they're not happy. I would not try and go that angle. But the third play is referring to a referral to the network of your happy customers. Inbound referrals from your VC partners. So this would be your VC partner sending you a lead, which they love to do. Outbound to the network of your VC partners. So this would be me going to my, let's pick Byron Dieter, for instance. He's over at Bessemer Venture Partners. Shout out Byron if you ever see this. He's absolutely savage, very, very smart, known as the father of cloud or one of the fathers of cloud. So not to be all doctrinal on you, but this would be me if Byron invested in me, from Bessemer to my company. This would be me going to his network on LinkedIn and saying, like, is there any person that I want to prospect into that I can find here? Inbound referrals from the C-suite. That's nice. So that would be my CEO sending me a lead. Outbound to the network of the C-suite, meaning I'm going to my CEO's network connections and saying, oh, I want to prospect into Twilio, and my CEO is connected to someone at Twilio. So can I leverage that relationship? Inbound referrals from your advisors. Outbound to the network of your advisors, meaning going to their LinkedIn profile, seeing if they're connected. Inbound referrals from your board of directors. Outbound to the network of your board of directors. The difference between those two is advisors don't necessarily have control of the company. They're just advising. Board of directors actually does have some level of control of the company. Inbound referrals from your customer advisors. It's a new wave and trend for people to have customer advisors. And what that means is they use the product, they really, really liked it. And companies oftentimes, well, I'm just going to be candid on this line. They'll just swap them stock to give them a case study and to kick open their network. So this would be inbound referrals from your customer advisors. 13, outbound to the network of those customer advisors. And all of these cases for VC partners, for C-suite, for advisors, your board of directors, and your customer advisors, typically what they want to see is that you put in some effort as a rep, meaning you go to their LinkedIn profile and see if there's anyone there and then talk to them about it, you know, versus the rep that's sitting there and waiting for the inbound referral. So proactive is usually the game that I'm playing from the outbound perspective. So in no case scenario would I ever wait on a inbound, you know, of like, if I'm a rep, if I'm a good sales rep, if I'm a high quality sales rep, my mindset needs to be, bar none, I'm in control of my own destiny. So it's nice if you give me a bluebird and an inbound referral, but I'm not going to count on that. Like, I'm going to go outbound. And then if you send me an inbound, it's just gravy. You know, so most of these people are very, very powerful people and they don't want to do the work for you. So I would suggest going to their profile and finding the people that you want to sell into. Inbound referrals from an influencer, outbound to the network of influencers. A lot of companies will buy an influencer, for instance, you know, and the handshake agreement is like, you send us leads. Now, keep in mind, I do think that I should stress here, I am not one of these, meaning my sponsors have been very, very nice enough to say, hey, we're going to sponsor you to do content, but they don't control the mic, and there's not some handshake agreement. So that has freed me up to tell the truth, which is very, very valuable to me. But this happens quite a bit with industry influencers. Inbound referral from non-sales employee. The reason I say that is a non-sales employee is usually, if it's a sales employee and it's an inbound referral, they just sell it themselves. You know, so this would be a CSM, you know, passing you a lead. 17 is a non-sales hire. So a CSM, for instance, that used to work at the prospective company. So they used to work, CSM used to work at Twilio, and I'm trying to prospect into Twilio. So how do I leverage that relationship? There are 5 plays to your network. Past employees of a prospective company. So people that you know that used to work at Twilio. B is they people that you know that work at a prospective company. So how many people do I know that work at Twilio, but they're, for lack of better terms, groundswell, meaning they're individual contributors. They're not the person that makes the final decision. People who work at Twilio that are the decision maker. That's nice if you have people within your network. Usually the first category that people exhaust. You're mutually connected with the decision maker at a prospective company. So let's say that you are connected to the DM over at Twilio. How do I leverage that relationship on LinkedIn, but they're not responding back to you? And then people are interacting with you on LinkedIn that work at the prospective company. So it might sound crazy, but sometimes even though they're connected to us and we've sent them several messages, they won't respond, and then they'll interact with your content. This has happened to me, I cannot tell you how many times. So point being, these are the 5 plays, very, very granular, but these are the 5 plays within your network that you can use. Prospects that you met at a networking event, you interacted with a non-sales employee, or people who interact with a non-sales employee on social, meaning they interacted with your CSM and you're like, oh shoot, they're at Twilio, you know, so I bet there's some kind of relationship. And then the last one is competitors with your current clients. I hate this play, full disclosure. I don't know, some people like it, you know, but some people like it, so I had to list it. So this is, you know, I have just sold into, I'm not going to pick anyone. I'm trying to think of like 2 opposing forces of like, I just sold into Taylor Swift, and now I want to use that information to sell into Katy Perry because she's a competitor with Taylor Swift. So I think it's very disrespectful to Taylor. I think it's very disrespectful to your current client to do this. And I don't think it's very effective and good messaging to your competitor, really to their competitor. All it really does is update them on the tech stack that they're using. But here's a play in terms of relationship that you can leverage. So again, that category is going to raise the likelihood they'll take a meeting, but not necessarily that they'll buy. The second category here under Bridgebound, and again, Bridgebound is a trigger-based event that did not relate, the trigger wasn't in relationship to your marketing team. By the way, I'm probably going to go about 5 minutes over, full disclosure, now looking at the meat and the time. But the second category here, and this is a category that account executives love and that BDRs should get to love, is bridge bound based on history. So this can be an extremely lucrative pot. So a lot of companies spend time over and over and over opening, cold outbound, cold outbound, cold outbound. Two problems with that. Number one, they're very likely doing one of these triggers, so they're not cold outbound. And number two, there's a lot of times some pre-existing relationship, meaning there's some history between you and this person or you and this company. And they aren't leveraging that relationship to understand, what changed and can I sell into them now? Like, was there a trigger that they couldn't buy in the beginning, but now they can buy? So the first one and the most lucrative one is people who requested a demo but didn't schedule one. The reason I say this is the most lucrative is because bizarre enough, and this is going to make your stomach sick as it does mine every single time I see it, which is probably on the daily, the average conversion that I'm seeing of people who are requesting to talk to your sales team that are getting a meeting on the calendar is around, on the high end, 25%. Right? So meaning if you had 100 people who requested to talk to your sales team because of process, because of the amount of qualification things you take them through, because of banned questions being asked, because of messy handoffs, because of not following up immediately, because of the prospect not being able to schedule in real time on your website with a couple of different tricks that you can do, a actual conversation with your sales team, we have a 25 on the high end % conversion. I mean, let's argue that 35% truly were unqualified. You still have a delta of 40% of the people on the if you're converting well, 40% of people who are requesting to talk to your sales team actually get who are qualified, actually get a meeting with your sales team. So there's a huge topic here. If you want to know a little bit more, I'm going to do a full-blown webinar with Chili Piper and how I leverage them to drive 70% more conversion in a day. On average for the rest of my tenure at that company. It's very quick, very easy to do. But if you want to see more on this topic and why it's so jarring, if you go to Green Room Candor on the tour website and go to the Salt Lake City of Green Room Candor, and me and Keenan go really, really deep on the topic. But the first place of play here, the reason it's number one and it's the most lucrative is in a good case scenario, 25% of the people who requested to talk to you actually got to talk to you. So there's a meaty bucket of leads who wanted to talk to you, but didn't get the chance to because of the process, because we want to protect the AE's calendar. I'm like, from what? Pipeline? Anywho, I can't go into it now. We get heated. Green Room Candor for Salt Lake City. If you check out that episode, we go pretty deep on it. Close lost is the second bucket here. Close lost, they went competitive and they're up on renewal. You can do a trigger here of if they bought your competitor, that after 10 months that you flex them into a sequence and follow up with them. Chances are they're not happy. The Salesforce stat says that, Zendesk stat says that 80% of people after one bad experience would be willing to switch to a competitor or at minimum have a conversation. So, chances are that they did have one bad experience. So showing up 10 months, a couple months before renewal and asking them how it's going isn't a bad play. There's one company I know in specific that's really lethal at this. And I can't tell you the gobs of money that they have, sopped up because of it. Close loss, they didn't hit ICC, meaning ideal customer company. So they weren't big enough, for instance. This you can trigger off of if their employee count goes high enough in your CRM, they flex into the sequence. Didn't hit ICC, meaning a qualification criteria. Let's say they didn't have the right tech stack. You can also do this within your CRM of they didn't have a data provider. Now they do. And so they automatically in real time go into the sequence. And then my favorite bucket, close lost, you messed up. So if they're giving you any kind of, and again, the reason I can be so bold is I'm not staring at anyone right now, but the reason if they tell you no budget, bad timing, not interested in the sales cycle, the reason is you messed up. You didn't find the problem, or you didn't add enough value, or you, worse, didn't add enough value by finding the problem. You know, so if you demoed someone and then they all of a sudden give you one of these litany of, you know, I'm focusing on my career right now and I'm not in the headspace to be in a relationship, it's because you did something wrong. So this can be a really great sequence to revisit, fall on your sword, and create another meeting, essentially, where you can find the problem. The third play here is demoed in the past and ghosted or went dark. The difference between this play and you messed up is you messed up means they told you why they're not. Thank you, Danny. That means a lot to me. She said, real talk, love this. I want to tell the truth on the line, you know, from as much as I can from here on out. Maybe it's Keenan giving me a little bit of gumption, but, you know, the SaaS industry is bleeding. Make no mistake. 76% of SDRs aren't hitting quota. 85% of AEs aren't hitting 75% of quota. And a lot of this is why. You know, so I get pretty fired up about it. And to everyone's credit, they're after the right things. So we just have to unhinge several of these god-awful myths to help ourselves. So point being, the demoed in the past and then they ghosted and went dark, it means that they just stopped responding. You messed up means they told you one of these false objections. Executive churn is the next play here. This means for this play, this means this is a lethal play. You can use user gems to do it. Most people want to do this, but they don't have the way to automate it. But executive churn means your prospect changes companies. So they, someone who used your product and went to a prospective company, you guys are firing me up in the chat. You don't need to add gas on the fire. I can't be more candid. But they use your product and went to another prospective company. They use your product and they change roles internally. So this is for a cross-sell or expansion sell, or they never use your product before, but they came into a company that you're prospecting in. User gems can automate all three of these. It's absolutely lethal. The statistics showed that 90% of the buying decisions are going to be made for a new leader within the first 70 days. So this all comes down to timing. I thought you were calling Becc a Karen for her soapbox. It'd be fair. But usually Karens don't want to talk about B2B SaaS and a beanie. So, but maybe they do. I don't know. But they, people who never used your product before, but they took a prospective role at the company. So this bucket is going to be very big. You can use user gems to do it. They can automate the crud out of it, not the messaging, but flexing the person into the sequence. And their team's really great. So I'd suggest checking them out. They opened your prospecting emails. They open them aggressively. The difference between these two for me is the play. If they open my prospecting email, I want to call them twice that day and twice the next day. If they open them aggressively, but didn't actually take the meeting, there's usually one of two reasons why they would open an email aggressively. You know, aggressive being defined as 10 or more times, but they didn't take the meeting. Let me see if you can guess the two reasons. But I'll move on for now. But 7 is vendors who just sold you their product. So tit for tat, also don't like this play, but like I sold you something and then you want to try to counter sell me. They agreed to a demo and then ghosted on the initial demo. This can be a big bucket. They say, yes, I want to have a demo, but then they ghost you. This can be a very big play. The average industry statistics show that you're going to get around a 25% no-show rate over email. You're going to get a 40% no-show rate over call. So if I had to guess why, it's because they feel pressure on a call, and on an email, if they don't want to take the meeting, they just wouldn't respond to you. But either way, you're setting these meetings and then you're leaking out 40% of your funnel by not having a no-show process. So I'd be prophylactic by running an anti-no-show process beforehand by sending them content. And once they do, I would trigger them into the play, you know, and basically fall on my sword and be like, did I mess up? Last time we talked, blah, blah, you know, how did I miss the boat on this one kind of thing. The last two here are people who ghosted you on the initial demo, but they didn't tell you the problems they were running into. Here that they did. And then prospects where you received an out of office. So we got 1 minute left. I'm going to take another 5 if you don't mind. So if you have to churn, I'm going to cry myself into oblivion tonight, but you won't know that until later. But you absolutely, absolutely can, and we'll send the rest of the recording. The last two categories here, I'm going to jump into bridge-bound based on pain, problems, or symptoms. This is probably the most, from my perspective, groundbreaking category. And the reason I can say that is because the impetus of the idea did not come from me. So I developed this, and this has done amazing things for my org. And who I developed that based off of their work, I want to see if you can guess in the chat whose work I read and dove into when I was like, oh, shoot, you should sequence people based on them having a problem. Overt indicators that they're having a problem. Let's see if you can guess. But this is going to be a category where you you're noticing that they're running into problems, running into pain, running into symptoms, and they have overt symptoms that they have a problem that you solve for. So it looks like no one can guess it. So it's Keenan. Keenan, after reading his book, Gap Selling, I could not stress it more. No, I do not get any kind of kickback. It is one of the most groundbreaking methodologies I have seen on the market. I would dare say ever, but it's hinged off of people having a problem. So this category is going to be a lot of different plays that you can run from a sequence perspective, where you have noticed things that give you the impression that they have a problem. So this is going to raise the likelihood that they're ultimately going to buy. If I'm in a desert and I don't have a water bottle, I got a big problem. If you're selling water in a desert, it doesn't matter your sales technique. Does not matter. I mean, it wouldn't hurt if you had good sales technique. Gap Selling is the name of the book. Gap Selling, I could not recommend it more, and I could not recommend Keenan's body of work more. I was on a bus with him for 16 days, and I was still learning from him. Still learning over and over and over and over and over how to ask questions to find a problem. But point being, these are from the pipeline perspective. That's from discovery on. This is from a pipeline perspective, how to call the people that are in the desert when you sell water, how to sequence them based on how to, everyone wants a conference with a whole bunch of people who are decision makers who are running into your problem. The problem is that no one will attend that conference. Right? So these are plays that you can dictate off of. You are noticing that that they probably have a problem that you solve for. So your sales technique just decreases down. It doesn't have to be that high. If you're the right person at the right time, this is how to call your shots of you're in like they're in market, even if they didn't know it, because they had a problem that you can solve. You know, so this category is going to be all of the plays based on that. They left a negative review of your competitor, meaning they had a problem they were looking to solve with your competitor. They didn't get it solved with your competitor. And so they're a ripe candidate. So they left a negative review. Heaven forbid they do that, then they're a ripe candidate. Churn customers of your competitor. These two aren't necessarily scalable from the perspective of you're just going to have to go to the review sites. But a very, very lethal play of my reps. Act of God, this is, in March of 2020, all of a sudden people had a problem that Charmin toilet paper solved for, right? They had a fear, that they weren't going to be able to use restroom for several months. So an act of God is there's some industry shift where all of a sudden your product comes center focus. A great example, let's see if you can guess the one tech platform that had that solved a problem that most people were running into all of a sudden in March of 2020. Let's see if you can guess the one platform. Bingo, brilliant, Josh. Zoom. All of a sudden, school districts, ballet studios, everyone had the problem of they couldn't talk to the people they needed to talk to keep their business open. So Zoom, in this case scenario, an act of God sequence is not only do I have one person in the desert, I all of a sudden have 800 people who are in the desert, and I've got 800 bottles of water. So this you can't obviously count on, but it's a play worth mentioning. And the last one's here, and I'm going to spend 2 minutes here. Just kidding, I'm going to go 10 minutes over because we still have to cover this one. So give me 6 more minutes, and I promise I will close out at 10 after. But these last plays are probably the most significant. Most people are evaluating their TAM, meaning their total available market, and their ABM accounts, meaning that the customers that they want to target, based off of some criteria that they think will cause a bigger sale, like 200 employees or more, or they're within a certain industry. The one thing that 100% of the companies I have seen have not included in that TAM selection is what are the overt criteria that would mean this segment of customers have a problem that I solve for. Absolutely bananas. What increases the likelihood of a sale and what increases the size of that sale is the size of the problem. I've never seen a company do ABM selection according to what would be the overt indicators that these people are running into a problem. They'll say it's industry segment. I want to select ABM or TAM on industry segment. And I'm like, wait, so I'll explain to companies, like, let's say you're a video platform. And I'm like, that's like saying you need pipeline help. And another video company, because they're in your same industry vertical, also needs pipeline help. And they're like, that's ridiculous. And I'm like, I'm aware. I'm aware. So industry segment isn't going to be the main driver. It's going to be, do they have a problem that I can solve for? So this is a way, if I'm selling training, for instance, if I sequence in people, all post-IPO companies that miss their Q3 revenue targets, all of a sudden I have a list of companies that I don't know if they need sales training, but I'm guessing they do. They miss their numbers, right? So I would start brainstorming of, are there any lagging indicators, business impact, or variables? A variable example being, if I'm selling training and I notice that there is a hypergrowth team, they've just hired 50 sales employees and they only have 2 managers and they have no sales enablement. I don't know if they have a problem, but I'm guessing that they do based on those statistics. So the great thing about this is you can automate this, meaning you can put triggers in your CRM that say, thanks to Crunchbase, shout out Crunchbase if they're on the line, of I want people who have grown by this amount, who only have this amount of hires, and I'm going to flex them into the sequence. Or I want to sequence in all post-IPO companies, that have missed their revenue targets. So I'd be thinking about, if number one, first things first, which will take probably 6 months to understand, who do I sell to via data? Who are the buyers that are the most likely to convert from the first booked meeting? Not opinion, but like for all of my closed won, who is a level of title or discipline of title? That's step one. Step two, that will take the breadth of the 6 months, is what problems do I solve for that title? No, Crunchbase isn't a sponsor. So this is what I'm saying. I'm an unpaid hand. Crunchbase isn't a sponsor. So the second piece that I would wonder is, what problems do I solve for that title? What problems do I solve for that title? Step three, so we got, who do I actually sell to based on data, not opinion, from a first meeting perspective in a close one. Step two, keep in mind, 99.9% of companies haven't taken any of these steps. So I say that not to be disrespectful. I say that with immense respect, that there's an opportunity here for us to turn this thing around. Who are the titles I sell into? What problems do I solve for that person? Not what pain symptoms do they have? What problems do I solve for them? And then number three, what would be the symptoms from a company perspective of someone who did have this problem? So if I have a virus, for instance, let's put COVID aside, please. But if I had the flu, what are the watery eyes, sniffy nose, red face, overt indicators that you can tell from a company if they're running into your problem? And then how do I sequence people accordingly in the CRM? So again, the strength of this is you can automate all of this. You can automate all of this into the play. And if you don't believe in personalization, then you can send out relevance to messages anyway. meaning this is an advocacy for personalization. This is an advocacy for just build the system and then you flex people in and all of a sudden, bada bing, bada boom, you have personalized, what most people call personalized messaging according to their problems at scale. Like you don't even have to touch it, which is amazing. So anywho, I digress. Just kidding, we're at 12:10. 5 more minutes, I promise. I promise, I promise, I promise. 5 more minutes and then I will close out. Please don't kill me. So the third category here is going to be bridge bound based on an educated guess that they are in market. So here it's an educated guess that they have a problem that you solve for. Bridge bound based on an educated guess they're in market is that you can take by an overt indicator, you would guess that they are ready to buy, whatever you sell. So the first one here is a channel play. So this is, let's say that for instance, I'm a data provider, or I'm a sales engagement platform, and they just bought a data provider. So I would, dare to say like, okay, you just bought data. What are you going to do with that data? You want to send out emails and make calls, et cetera. So I want to know anytime someone bought data. So again, you can do this from an automated perspective. G2 track is a way to do that. You can tell, where do you get those alerts? Great question, Josh. I was answering that just now. We're one mind. G2 track is, and G2 stack is a way to understand from a overt trigger perspective, and it's for free, what tech they integrated within their system. I went there to monetize that acquisition because of how cool I thought it was. So you can understand if they integrated outreach, and that's important to me of like, I sell something on the back end of that for free. I can gate through all the companies who just bought outreach into this play. Most of this, the problem with most sales teams or SDR teams is that we are asking them to do all this research themselves. And then they're like, I can't scale it. But you can have automation do all this research. We can deliver them to the right house, to the right person who is buyer ready, dressed up, smelling good, with a bottle of wine in their hand. And then leave it to them to do well or not well once they walk into the house on the date, et cetera. But most of the automation can take the brunt off of this messaging, for your pipeline creators. The rest of these triggers are going to be firmographic. These are all Crunchbase. I'm not paid to say that. Beetlejuice. But Crunchbase can do all of this. And these are firmographic triggers. Firmographic meaning it has to do with their company that companies will go through that you can sequence into a play. So companies that recently IPO'd, you can sequence them automatically if that's important to you. Companies that were acquired. Companies that acquired another company. So Seismic just acquired Lessonly. You could flex them in automatically in real time and you could dictate the messaging. And if you don't believe in personalization, you can send it out without even a person involved. It's awesome, right? Companies that raised funding, companies that made a new product release, like if they just made a significant product release and that's important to you because, you solve a problem on the back end. Companies that released a new integration. Companies that are in hypergrowth, you can define what hypergrowth means. If hypergrowth means they just acquired 50 sales employees, and I want to flex in all companies that just acquired, over a certain amount of employees in a certain frame of time. Companies that moved headquarters, companies that opened new locations, and companies that are evaluating a competitor. So the reason this one is last is this is the least scalable on the entire encyclopedia. Of companies that are currently evaluating a competitor of yours. People lose sleep over this category. I understand why. They always want to be in that stage of the game, but there's no way to call your shot here. So this would just be through the grapevine. Even if it's not scalable to get someone into the play, writing out the play for your reps of what the messaging should look like is 90% of the value. If you're a leader, you write out that play, and then all your reps will come back to you and be like, well, I don't talk like this, or can I add things into this line? And you say, go ahead, but here's the supporting infrastructure. And 90% of the time, they're just going to send the message as is. So as a leader, I would say you have to be monomaniacal about understanding what's the messaging technique that works here. Can I write that sequence out front to end for my reps, enable them with it, structure in real time to where people flex into the sequences. And then when they say like, can I add some sentences here? This isn't me. I'd be like, let her rep. But I want to get you 99% there. So those are the 4 categories of bridge bound. The last one over here on the right is cold outbound. You know, so I'm going to go into in webinar 3, all of how you can incorporate this trigger-based relevance into and core static relevance in terms of buyer persona and personalization into a playbook. But these are all of the plays that I know, at least under God's green earth, that you can run. And again, I hope the theme is running here, that you can automate all of this, you can structure out a play, and you can write the messaging for your reps. And then the only thing that they have to worry about is the thing that you need a human for, which is how do I personalize one-to-one messaging if I'm going to do that? And then how do I hook it? 2 to 3 4-word hook. There's been a lot of platforms who approached me and said, we do personalization at scale. I'm like, what do you mean by that? They're like, we send 15,000 messages that are personalized. I'm like, no, you don't. They're like, yeah, we do. And I'm like, no, you don't. And they say, yeah, we do. And I say, but you can't hook it. You can't hook it with a machine. And I've never had a platform say, yeah, we can. So point being, I'm going to use my reps cerebral calories on the 2 to 3 words, 4 to 5 words that I really need them for, and to add in the human flavor. But the majority, the lion's share of this, if you create a system like this, and I would pick, you know, a handful of plays to get started, 4, 5, 6 plays of like, I'm going to put my toe in the water. I wouldn't look at this map and be like, I can't do all of this. I'd say, what are the 5 or 6 most important plays to me as a leader? And how do I craft a sequence front to end so I can enable my reps and I can enable myself, if I am the rep, you know, to basically do all of these triggers, but without having to do any level of research to do it. So that is everything for the encyclopedia. I cannot thank you enough for coming today and for staying 17 minutes over. Absolutely means the world to me. For the first time on the tour, I believed, and I'm gonna put out tomorrow a sizzle reel from Salt Lake that's very meaningful for me. But for the first time on the tour, I believed, based on the conversations that I had with industry leaders, with Manny Medina, et cetera, we have it recorded at lunch, I believe that we can save the sales industry. And I believe that we can turn it into something that is buyer-centric, something that is about our prospects, something that isn't a glory hog, someone that isn't selling people stuff when they don't need it, that isn't, you know, hiding lies from their customers. And that's the way to hit quota. So for the first time, I believe that we actually can do that. It's just going to come down to rooms like this. What kind of frameworks, what kind of maps do we put together to enable ourselves and enable our reps to be able to do that? So for truly the first time in my career on this tour in Salt Lake City and in San Francisco with Manny, I believe that we can do something about this. And I believe that we can pivot the industry of sales, not just by being the change, but from a macro level, by leveraging tech, leveraging systems like this, leveraging, you know, high quality messaging to be our prospects advocate again. So cannot thank you enough for attending the tour if you did. Cannot thank you enough for attending today. Thank you so much for being so engaged and digging into this content. Let me know if you have any questions, holla@FTScript.co. I just hired someone yesterday who's actually the tour manager from the tour, and he is going to be scouring through those messages every single day. So I just got a little more wings, so now I can fly. So if you have any questions, et cetera, need anything, we're gonna send the recording. We're gonna send out this asset if you didn't get it, and send out both of those after this webinar. So I appreciate you all attending today. And let me know your thoughts. And I will see you for tour asset number 2 webinar, which is next week on Tuesday. And it's the 7 steps to a great cold call. Well, I'll dive deep into that infrastructure. So if you want to structure for a cold call, then tune in next Tuesday, 11 a.m. PT, and I'm going to dive deep into that infrastructure. But thank you for today. Talk to you all soon.